After making a video about how a reintroduced special stat would affect all Pokemon, I got a lot of requests asking me to do the same for a physical stat. But I decided to go one step further, or a few steps further, and decided that if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this right, and I was gonna go through all of these stats to create a new, simplified version of Pokemon. Just from the outset, this isn't a way of saying, oh, this way of playing Pokemon is way better. That's not the purpose of this video, it's just saying, hey, this would be a different way of playing Pokemon. It's just a fun experiment to see how Pokemon could be changed by using the stats that we already have, but just tweaking them slightly. I think it would be really cool if I eventually develop this into something like a showdown metagame, or maybe even just a fan game but with a different type of stats. So, on to the video. Pokemon Stats Simplified. If you watch the video on the special stat, then I went with just a straight average of the two special stats. However, this time I've weighted them slightly, just because it's not just the special and physical stats which I'm changing. I think that by having a weighted average, you're going to get some stats which better reflect how the Pokemon are going to work. If you remember, one of the main issues that I had with the special stat is that a lot of Pokemon are designed to have 6 stats. So implementing that into just 5 stats would become much more difficult, and even now, implementing that into just 4 stats would become even more difficult. For the HP stat, the calculation that I've used is I've used the HP stat plus each of the defenses halved. This gives it the equivalent of 2 whole stats, so I've divided it by 2 in order to get a singular stat. This means that Pokemon with naturally high defenses have this reflected in their HP stat, and it means that some Pokemon like Blissey don't become too powerful as their HP gets limited a bit. As for both physical and special, the way that I've decided to calculate these is to take their attacking stat and the other half of their corresponding special stat. This obviously makes it 1.5 of a equivalent stat, so just divide it by 1.5 to give you the new special or physical stat. By going with this slightly weighted method, it means that attacking Pokemon will be a bit more offensive, and it means that Pokemon with really high defenses suddenly won't also become incredibly strong attackers. Instead, their bulk is reflected in the HP stat, as I talked about before. As for speed, I decided to keep that the same. I tried going with a few different ways of maybe implementing attack into speed, but there isn't really that much of a correlation between attacking power and speed as there is with defensiveness and HP. Splitting the defenses over HP means that bulk is represented across those. I also wanted to change how some of these stats function and how they interact with other mechanics in Pokemon. A lot of things such as items, so take the choice specs, assault vest, the choice band, or even weather effects such as sandstorm, provide a buff to some stats. Now obviously, because these stats are much more powerful and much more important now, I would say that you would probably have to lower the effect of these from 1.5 to something like 1.25 or 1.3. I don't think Pokemon does many things to 2 decimal places, so maybe 1.2 or 1.3. In the special video, I was more keeping everything as it was normal, but seeing as in this metagame, I'm trying to do a much more balanced game, I would say that lower these and change these. There's also some abilities which affect stats, and Fluffy and Ice Scales are not these. These are abilities that reduce damage rather than buffing a stat. It's a bit of a weird grey area, but Huge and Pure Power do buff stats, so they actually increase your attack, whereas Fluffy and Ice Scales don't increase your defense or special defense. They rather just take the pure damage and then impact it that way. I would say personally to keep Huge and Pure Power as they are, because the Pokemon that get them are relatively weak. The Pokemon that gets the biggest buff that has one of these abilities is obviously Mega Mawile, who now has 111 physical, but I feel as though Mega Mawile is meant to be incredibly strong, and I think that taking that away from it takes away most of its identity. Stat changes are also very confusing in this new metagame. So what I've decided to do is that moves that change multiple stats that have combined together don't combine these stat changes. So Calm Mind doesn't provide a +2 special, it just provides a +1 special. I think that maybe to differentiate these moves from a move like, I don't know, Howl or Meditate would be that you could add on a small heal to them. Maybe something just like 1/8. This way we're still taking into account their defense, which remember, some of their defense now impacts their HP. I would go with something like just 1/8. I think that would be enough. But if you think that that's too weak or too strong, then let me know. This then obviously provides a bit of a dilemma with Shell Smash, which was something which I struggled with on the special video as well. This is because Shell Smash increases and decreases stats at the same time, so it would be very difficult to implement when you have a lot fewer stats. I think that the best way to do this would be for it to provide a +1 to both of your general stats and then a +2 to your speed, but it also cuts some of your health. I would probably go with 1/4, but I could also see that not being enough and maybe it has to be a half or a third. I'm a little hesitant on giving a +2 to the general stats, as that also makes you quite bulky, and it feels though giving a Geomancy boost would just become really incredibly powerful, even if you are losing some or quite a bit of your health alongside it. With all of the admin completed, I just wanted to take a few moments just to say that I now have a channel membership set up, and for just £2, you can join and become part of the Crustacean Association. You'll get access to some earlier videos and also a shout out in every video. There is absolutely no obligation and everything will still remain free to air, but if you want to help out the channel, this is a great way to do so. Thank you. As for which Pokemon become a lot more powerful, well, in this video I'm going to go over some of the extremes. In another video I'm going to talk about some unique cases of some Pokemon that become much more powerful or much weaker, but this video will be focused on numbers. Before going over some stats, I just want to clarify one thing, and that is I've taken away all extra forms of any Pokemon from the spreadsheet that I used. This is because forms generally don't change their HP stat, as the formulas that I used changed these. That being said, the strongest Pokemon is obviously Arceus, who still retains its 120 in every stat. However, now only has a base stat total of 480. It's quite funny to consider that this is the strongest base stat total in the game, because this is the main base stat total for a Pokemon like Bramblegast. After Arceus, the two next strongest Pokemon would be Eternatus and Mewtwo. But if you don't include main legendaries in this, then it would be Regigigas, Slacking, and Regieleki, who is extremely far away from all of the other minor Regis. And this is because faster Pokemon generally tend to rank much higher in base stat total in this new format, and I think that that's now because speed makes up a much higher percentage of base stat total compared to what it did before. Dragapult is an incredibly fast Pokemon, and it is 17 base stat total points higher than the next pseudo-legendary Salamence, despite the fact that these two both started on the same level. When talking about HP, it actually doesn't change at all who the strongest Pokemon are. Blissey, Chansey, and Guzzlord in that order. They're the three Pokemon with the highest HP naturally, and they continue to be the three Pokemon with the highest HP, making them much less viable as walls, although they are still pretty decent walls, but it makes them much less passive as a trade. Do you think that this would be something that they would enjoy, or something which would quite ruin how they work? For the physical stats, Kartana actually has the highest physical stat in the game, at 164. This is because Kartana actually has an incredibly good defense stat of 131, which ensures that it stays as a powerful physical attacker. One of the first major changes that we've seen here is that Stack Attacker comes in second with a physical stat of 157. This is because it has an amazing physical defense stat and a good physical attack stat. Stack Attacker is already one of the best Trick Room Pokemon, but I think in this metagame, with a much higher attack stat, it would become much more powerful. It also made me think of how would you treat the move Body Press in this scenario. I can't think of a way to do it. I was just going to suggest have it just be a base 80 fighting move that Pokemon can use for coverage, but if you have a better way to deal with it in this scenario, let me know. With these changes, Groudon would also come in third. One thing that I did find quite interesting is that generally the Pokemon that have good physical are slow, whilst the Pokemon that have good special are quite quick. I created an extra column on my chart which basically tracked how the average stat of a Pokemon has changed. So if your average stat goes up quite a bit in the change, that's generally because they're a very quick Pokemon. Whereas if it goes down a lot, it's generally because they're very slow or quite defensive, as these stats now start to become worth comparatively less. For special stats, the strongest Pokemon is Kyogre, which is a real drop-off from the physical stats before. I think a lot more physical attackers have much more physical defense than special attackers do have special defense. Not counting legends, the strongest Pokemon is Cursola, who is literally just a point ahead of Xurkitree, who themselves is just ahead of Fluttermane. Fluttermane and the Paradox Pokemon are quite unique, as a lot of them have double stats that kind of work in pairs. Fluttermane actually has these in triples, so very little changes about this Pokemon. I'll also point out that Xurkitree has access to Tail Glow, which would be a +3 to special, and would make it one of the most powerful Pokemon in the entire game. Because speed stays the same, let's now look at the other end of the spectrum, and which Pokemon have the lowest stats. I'm only including fully evolved Pokemon in this, because I think that that's much more of a better comparison. The weakest 3 Pokemon actually stay the same. It's Wishiwashi's solo form, Shedinja, and Smeargle. Shedinja would also still have the lowest HP in the whole game, because I feel as though taking it away from its 1 HP gimmick would ruin the Pokemon, so it definitely just stays with 1 HP. Coming after it would be Wishiwashi, and then after that Delibird, who is quite the jump up. It has 45 HP. Even though I said I'm not including forms, Deoxys attack would actually come in third if we were, because then it would only have 35 HP. With the physical stats, Chansey and Blissey maintain their spot at the bottom of the ranking, but are now joined with Wishiwashi solo. This spot was originally held by Shuckle, however, due to the nature of how things have changed, Shuckle has gained a lot of attack. It now has 83 attack. The same also applies to Special, where it went from the bottom to being somewhere around the middle. Stonjourner now takes its place, closely followed by, say it with me, Wishiwashi and Smeargle. I'm starting to think that going through the weakest Pokemon wasn't really a good idea because there's a lot less variety in them. Good thing that that's the end of the video. Which Pokemon do you think would become incredibly powerful in this metagame, or which Pokemon do you think would have the biggest of fall-offs? If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like or subscribe, or maybe even becoming a channel member. It would really help out, and it's great to see that people enjoy and interact with these type of videos. Thank you.